He is recognized for his exceptional management skills in government and in the private sector, contributing to the country's economic progress and reshaping national values. With us in Thought Leaders, former Secretary of the Department of Public Works and Highways, MAP Management Person of the Year 2024, and the President and CEO of Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation, Mr. Rogelio Babes L. Singson. Good to have you on the program, Sec Babes. Thank you so much for joining
Cathy,
us.
for having me.
And for joining us at a time we had Bagyong Christine to deal with.
I know. So we'll have to address that as well.
Well, it reminds me of the time that, we would give you a phone call and, have that conversation live on air, talking about the clearing works of the DPWH in the storms that we've encountered during your term as DPWH
I actually spent
Secretary.
4 of my Christmas holidays outside the house because of mga typhoons.
Wow. And in that 6-year span, no?
And these are the
typhoons.
times when there are strong typhoons, yung mga November, December, ganyan yung dating ng malalakas.
True. Naalala ko pa nga yung sa atin, yung kay Yolanda.
Yolanda was the big one.
The clearing operations was so tough. We had to keep calling you every now and then. Tapos na ba? Do you miss it?
Well, I've always been open to public service, so that's part of me.
And I guess what we're not missing is, of course, the typhoons, no? And as they become even worse, and every onslaught, it's just become worse. Yun yung parang pinagkaiba during this point in time.
Yeah, in fact, if you will recall, when we were doing the master plan for river basins, we used to calibrate it beyond what used to be a 50-year rainfall event. We brought it up to 100. Now it has to be upgraded again. The recent typhoon Christine, the amount of rainfall brought to Bicol, my understanding is the volume average for 2 months was on one night.
So that's about 200 mm.
Yeah.
Even
that's
well above the master plan that we have.
That's correct.
We
have to recalibrate.
We have to recalibrate. What would your recommendation be then?
Well,
and which agencies should be involved in government to undertake
principally,
this?
it will have to be DIA and DPWH. And of course, the LGUs will have to cooperate in terms of the interventions.
National Irrigation Administration.
That's correct.
Very important, because there had been discussions during your term as DPWH in merging the projects of the National Irrigation Administration and the DPWH.
Well, the reason for that is if you impound water upstream, which is the role of NIA, National Irrigation Administration, so that they can have enough irrigation during dry season, by impounding them upstream, you really reduce the flooding that goes to the river system. So talagang dapat yan well-coordinated, well-identified, where to intervene in terms of reducing the amount of water that comes down the river system.
Sounds like kinakailangang, natatawa na kayo, coordination talaga ang importante. And it's something I know you tried to undertake during your time as DPWH
in fairness,
Secretary.
President BBM issued an executive order creating what we refer to now as the Integrated Water Resources Management Office. It's under the Office of the President. And the head of that, if I'm not mistaken, is the senior DNR USEC, CP David, who is a doctorate in hydrology, in planning, in a very capable person. No? And you have all the critical agencies, DPWH, DIA, LUA, MWSS, DBM, of course. And in fact, in some of those meetings in Malacanang, even Senior Deputy Speaker Don Gonzales used to attend because we need the help of Congress.
So you see a coming together of these various agencies and actors from the public and private sectors. Ito po yung talagang kakailanganin natin.
That's the only way that you can address, because without the holistic approach, you have some 30 agencies. Can you imagine 30 different agencies having their own budget in terms of trying to address water resources management? We've been blessed with a lot of rainfall, and yet look at what it causes us in terms of flooding, damage to agriculture, productivity is affected, economic growth is stunted. All of this
Pero bakit nga ba umiba na yung is it climate change? To what would you attribute it? You're an engineer. You'd see it from a very scientific
Yeah,
view.
aside from
What's the reason
Cathy,
for
aside from
the
climate
flooding
change,
each time we have typhoons?
urbanization, no? And then, of course, interventions need to be done in a strategic way. We keep saying, address this issue of water resources, river basin. Hindi pwedeng political jurisdictions. Because a river basin, upstream, downstream, di ba? So, if you try to address it based on political jurisdictions, it will not solve the problem. Next rainy season, yung nangyari sa taas, papunta na naman dyan. So, it has to be a holistic, end-to-end solution. And the best way of solving flooding and managing resources is impounding. Wala nang iba. Water impounding upstream, holding them during excess rainfall, and then use them during dry season.
And that's something that you've been able to achieve in Bonifacio Global.
Aside from that,
in
we've done
BGC,
that.
because you've done a catchment basin there as an engineer. You've constructed something that is now contributing to the fact that they're the only place in Metro Manila na walang baha.
That was a
Pag
simple
umulan.
solution, no?
How simple was it?
Well, of course, if we recall, Fort Bonifacio used to be a military base, golf course, so may absorption. Now, you develop, you put roads, you put drainage. If all that water collected by the drainage during a rainfall event goes to that tiny creek, which we call pinagkaisahan, behind BGC, that will overflow. Posibleng daanan yung kanto ng Kalayaan at EDSA. That's going to be lagpas tao. That's for sure. Okay? But that's why we had to size it in such a way that Burgos Circle, if you recall, that's 72 meters in diameter, about 4 or 5 stories deep. All of the water collected by the drainage system of BGC goes there first. And then when there is carrying capacity of that tiny creek, that's the only time you pump it out. But in this today, they don't even pump it out. They use it for irrigating all of the trees that you see around BGC. So one solution, luckily for us, the current administrator of National Irrigation Administration is an engineer, Engineer Gillian, Ed Gillian. He used to be the mayor of Pidig, Ilocos Norte. He came to me when I was with DPWH. Sabi niya, sir, kailangan namin ng ganito, ganyan, mag-impound kami. Paliwanag mo sa akin, what's your proposal? And then I told him, okay, let me use my flood control budget to do what you want so that there is no more flooding in the farmlands downstream. That's exactly what we're advocating.
So isang best case din yung parang use case na
Correct.
masasabi natin
Correct.
up in the north.
Yes, yes.
Pareho din itong
That's
horizontal
correct.
catch basin,
Impound
the
your
impounding
water.
of the water that we're
Retard-
now doing in BGC.
Yeah, retard the flow of water on your rivers because many of these rivers are either silted or nakain na mga subdivision, nalagyan na ng kalye, natakpan na. So they're going to overflow.
So we can do this in other cities
We can do that in
are
the whole
not
of
as new
Pampanga,
as
Bulacan
BGC.
area.
Pwede rin ba sa Maynila?
Of course.
In cities that have already been so
That's what we're trying to
congested
address
and urbanized.
on our roadways and lakes. We've identified where are the flood-prone segments of NLEX. So we'll put the proper intervention so that those segments don't flood anymore.
Like yung sa Pampanga, like you mentioned.
Yung ginawa namin sa Tulaok River, no, when the Carina happened sometime early this year, no, that was a simple engagement. You have to identify the specific area that is flood-prone and the intervention.
And that intervention is what you call impounding. Pero meron
Impounding,
din kayo
retarding basin,
nasabing phrase doon na stood out yung political jurisdiction. Para atang medyo
I know.
subjective yon, and the more challenging part really are the
Support.
fiefdoms,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
And the support that you get from the
course.
local politicians.
I keep telling them, if you're able to solve your flooding, your farmlands will be saved. You will have tree croppings every year and so on. No? You don't even have to campaign during election because you are able to help them economically.
During your term, ilan ang nakumbinsi ninyo that this would be the good of their constituency?
Marami-rami
Mga
din.
local fiefdoms.
Marami-rami din. Classic is of course Iloilo. You look at their river promenade. No? Now it's a major commercial development. No? And we reduced the flooding significantly using the Iloilo River. Ayos na ayos, malinis na. It can be done. Political will.
O yun nga, political will, ano? At babalikan ko rin yun dahil the reason why you've been chosen as Management Association of the Philippines Man of the Year is because of the work you've done at DPWH, and in particular, for your good governance and anti-corruption campaign.
I could not have done that without the support of President Noynoy, in fairness. No? So political will was there, and then we had a very clear mandate. No? I was not there to get rich. I was not there to be powerful. No? To me, that was more of a mission. That was a calling. Cathy, if you will allow me, I was in a retreat with our community, Ligaya ng Panginoon, and that afternoon somebody called me, sabi, are you open to being nominated? This was May of 2010. Sabi, to be considered as Secretary of Public Works. And I said, I'm in a retreat, I'll pray about it. The answer of the other guy said, I'm sure our prayers will be answered. So sabi ko, okay. So we prayed about it. The leader said, the topic of all topics for that retreat was radical discipleship for the Lord and country. Ganon. And then, sige, so I was sent on mission. Allow yourself to be a radical disciple. Allow yourself to take on this challenge. On the day I was going to be interviewed by President Noynoy, the reading for that day was enter the narrow gate. Enter the difficult road. The narrow road. Sabi ko, how can you not be so graphic? You're talking about roads, you're talking about infrastructure, and here I was going to discuss infrastructure with the President. So of course, that's all behind us now. So we accepted 6 years. I stood 6 years with President Noynoy. But as I said, I could not have done the programs without his full support.
You mentioned you weren't here to get rich. Was there a lot of opportunity?
Of
Knowing
course,
what you...
first day pa lang, may envelope nung nakatenga doon. Sabi ko, sa secretary ko, pagbawalan nyo ng bumalik din. So immediately, when I had to identify where were the sources of corruption. And I had to use a pro bono friend of mine to do a survey. What do people expect from DPWH? That's where we develop our mantra. No? Sabi sa akin, simple lang, sir. You have to use government resources for the right project, right cost, right quality. Yun lang. So that became, we had to cascade that. All of the employees of DPWH knew exactly that that was going to be what was going to be our management mantra. Right project. Ibig sabihin yan, are we doing the right projects that will benefit the community, not politicians alone? Kasi dati, yung farm to market, yung road to my farm pala ibig sabihin. Hindi pala to the community. Hanggang driveway ng aking bahay, ginasusan ng gobyerno. Second is right price. We had to do very competitive public bidding. No favored contractors, no political intervention. Bidding kayo. No. Third, right quality. I had to use third party to inspect. And this is where we were able to use the cadet engineers. No. And then, of course, President Noynoy said, Sec Babes, kulang ka ng dalawa. Dapat right on time. Tama naman siya. And then by the right people. O sabi ko, sir, right people, I need to change or replace at least 25% of our personnel to change the culture.
And you've been able to do it,
because I
replace the
did that in
25%?
Manila before joining. So
In the
change
reprivatization
culture.
of Manila, you had that change
Change the culture.
where you removed
Yeah.
25%.
That was the only way.
Lagi bang
Otherwise,
25% ang kailangan tanggalin para palitan ng culture? Bakit?
you had to remove the bad eggs. Alam
The bad
nila.
eggs are always 1/4 of an organization or an agency.
That was my assessment. No? To really, you could go slow burn. We had 6 years, not much time, so drastic. And we were able to do it by, of course, with the help again of President Noynoy, we offered early retirement para medyo compassionate ng pagtanggal.
You mentioned slow. When we talk about governance, it requires a lot of due
Process.
diligence, no? Processes. Diyan tayo maiipit.
That's correct.
Gusto nating gawin to kasi mabuti, pero matatagalan. And there had been investors who did complain, bakit ang tagal? Wala pa yung proyekto.
That's why, Cathy, to me, yung mga projects where the private sector can participate, let's do it through PPP. Because no government agency with all good intentions will be able to be as efficient as the private sector, especially for operations and maintenance of facilities. Transmission lines, rail, airport, seaport. May sira dyan. Kailangan sumunod ka sa lowest price. Kung poor quality naman. But otherwise, good intentions, bumili ka ng mas mahal dyan, baka makulong ka pa. Diba? So, the processes are so difficult for you to be able to be efficient in operations and maintenance.
But you've done focused PPPs.
That's correct.
That's what I know you did during those 6 years. Which ones did you think were appropriate for PPPs and which ones the regular route?
My
bids and
appreciation,
awards.
my exposure to PP started way back, no? When under the term of President Cory Aquino, I was assigned to handle the coordinating council of the Philippine Assistance Program. Remember that time, no? So we did train private sector, government agencies, and including consultants, no? Legal aspect, technical aspect, commercial aspect of how to do PPPs. No? And that's why we were able to at least spread the gospel. No? Dati ang tawag dyan, build, operate, transfer.
BOTs.
BOTs.
I remember that.
BOT, BOO, BTO, all that. So, eventually, sabi, hindi magandang pakinggan, public-private partnership was a little bit more pleasant. It's a partnership. Good. So, PPP, we did the PPPs across. Started with basis conversion. No? I was there in the height of Fort Bonifacio, privatization of John Hay, Subic, no? Together with Dick Gordon. I learned the ropes early on in terms of doing PPPs. No? So, just be fair, be transparent, no hanky-panky. Biruan nga namin, we started the first electronic bidding. Ang electronic bidding namin, we gave them paper, acetates, and I used the slide projector.
Okay. I was
That
thinking,
was so crude.
Nasa laptop na crude pa.
Wala pa no.
Wala pa, okay.
Overhead projector pa lang yun. So I gave them acetates, write down your bid, turn on the switch, paglabas ng numero, that was it. Highest bidder wins the project, no complaints.
When you were trying to spread that gospel of the 3 mantras, +2 of the late President Noynoy's, how did you get the buy-in? Because that meant working down the ranks and also working with your regional offices.
That's correct. We had at that time, 15, 18 regional offices and 200 plus district offices. I had to go around, end to end, but Batanes, all the way to Tawi-Tawi and So, pinasok ko talaga yan. And I explained to them, this is what we're going to do. This is my mandate. Tell me if there are politicians who's making life difficult for you and you cannot stand the heat. Either I take the burden or I put you elsewhere. You know, ganun kadiretso. No? But one thing I assured them was, pag may mga nag-retire na, I will not bring a single individual from outside. The position will be best. Whoever wants that position, go to a selection process. And many of them were promoted because sabi ko, pag nanghingi kayo ng endorsement from a politician, lalo ko kayong hindi i-consider. Because how can you refuse your patron? No? So, that was my ruling. And up to today, when I see me, sir, salamat kung hindi dahil sa inyo, hindi ako na-promote as regional, district engineer, and so on. Because I did not bring a single individual, except for my driver and security. That's another skwento.
So that made them comfortable about supporting you.
That's correct. That's correct. And I ate where they ate. I walked the talk. I'm there early. Pag sinabi kong 8 o'clock yung meeting natin, 8 o'clock tayo, I'm there even before 8 o'clock. I'm usually ahead of them. Kasi ang bisyo dati dyan. I went to a regional meeting. Isang tawag lang sa contractor kasi nila, 3 lechon ang dadating. Fiesta. So I said, okay, ganyan pala kayo ha. Sige, first meeting. Sabi ko, instead of cutting off my meeting at 12 o'clock, I ended it at 3. Tingnan nga natin kung makakain nyo pa yung lechon na yun, lamig-lamig din. That was how nasty I was in terms of sending the message. No? I mean, let's simplify. Hindi naman piyesta itong pinuntahan ko eh. No? I'm there to work. Yung mga pagpasok mo sa airport, yung mga karatula, welcome, ganito, ganyan. Tanggalin niya bago ko umalis sa airport. Before I leave the airport, take it out. I'm not a politician. I'm there to work.
Do you think you made a lot of enemies because of the changes that you wanted?
That's why I had to take my security. Kasi sabihan ako ni Pinoy, babes, hindi pwedeng ginagawa mo yung I go unannounced. I visit projects on weekends. That's why I lost all my weekends because I had to go to the field. Ang usapan sa opisina, I want the undersecretaries and the head directors to be in the head office Monday to Wednesday. Do your field work Thursday weekend. Para ganon, we can get together and talk about the problems and address the solutions. So, ako umiikot on my own. Sabi, hindi pwede yan, bibigyan kita ng security. Saan manggagaling sa yung security? PNP, sir, wag na. I've got my
So
own.
you refused. You just got your own security. Did you feel that your life was in danger at any point in those 6 years?
Sabi niya, murang buhay. Because I really bumped heads with big contractors and politicians as well. And the biggest threat was coming from, hindi ko na babanggitin, basta from Congress, kayang-kaya kitang patanggal. Naku, sabi ko, ang sagot ko sa kanya, naku, kung mapapatanggal mo ko, magpapasalamat ang asawa ko sa inyo.
But how did you deal with them if you've had an instance where you talk mismo doon sa local politician?
Ganito, no? I was very clear in terms of the rules. No? Clear use of funds, transparent. I'm held accountable for that. Every peso, I'll make sure it goes to the correct project. And then, of course, rule of law. No? Pag may nakita ko yung luko-luko kong tiga DPWH, tell me, sipain ko yun. I'll take them out immediately. You know? So, and then what I introduced was people's participation, yung citizens and stakeholders participation. I organized NGOs, media, kaya wala ba ko ng media, they were always successful. May monthly briefing kami, and then the church. Sabi ko, the projects I am doing for your community is for you. So you make sure that it is done properly. If it is not done properly, if it's done lousy and with below standards, you will not benefit from it. So make sure that bantayan nyo yan. No? So, that fifth element was to me very important. Get the community involved. Now, dealing with the politicians. Ito lang ang menu of projects. Even if you put in a project in your budget that is outside, even if you put it there, I will not implement it. Ganun lang kadiretso dyan. So, I gave them national roads, national bridges, flood control, ganito, ganyan. Pili kayo. If it is on my national road, I'll give it a priority because when I got there, there were still many national roads substandard. National bridges still made of wood. So ako walang pinilian, no color, no political alignments. No? Some of the liberals were complaining, yung kapitbahay kong kongresista, kalaban namin niya, mas malaki pa yung budget. Eh matagal nang pinabayaan yung distrito niya. Parating opposition yan, parati siyang walang budget. No? So sabi ko, wala akong pipilian dyan. National road, whoever is there will get the same national road. No? So that was how I dealt with them.
Yung bagyong Yolanda walang pinili. In terms of the destruction, the scale of it, and perhaps also the scale at which you organized the construction of the bunk houses na inakusahan na naging substandard. Ano yung mga learnings na siguro, just looking back at that, no? One of the most
first
powerful
of all,
typhoons
what is important
that
was
involved DPWH
the
contractors.
support of the local government. Luckily for me, we were able to deal very well with now Speaker Martin Romualdez, same mayor nun eh. So we agreed na, Mayor, I need this, I need the land so that we can have proper relocation. So he identified government lands and so on. Now, as far as the construction, hindi kami nagpatayo, contractors ng NHA. No? But the design and so on, we had to consult with the communities. You'll be surprised kung minsan yung gusto natin ayaw ng community. I'll give you an example. When this thing in Tawi-Tawi happened, no, yung siege, no, we were designing a house for them, concrete, ayaw na ng concrete. Gusto nila kahoy. At saka wooden slats yung floor. Sabi ko, oy, mali pala yung ating pinag-iisipan. Let's do it based on their standards, based on where they'll be comfortable. No? The same with Yolanda. They wanted the kitchen out rather than inside the house. Yung ganon. No? So we had to work around what they wanted.
But in terms of dealing with the local politicians, just
very important.
Very important, but very difficult. What would your learnings be? I mean, for government officials right now having to deal with the same kind of gravity of disaster preparedness.
Well, you just have to be firm. You know? As I said, otherwise you'll give in to everything. You have to be able to stand on principles that alam mong tama yung ginagawa mo, na this is going to be beneficial to the community and this is the best use of government resources. To me, no substitute for that.
I was just looking at a survey done by the MAP in 2023, and their biggest concern happens to be what we've been talking about over the past 20 minutes, corruption.
Yeah.
It appears that it's just been a sticky problem. I'm wondering from your point of view, as you've been with government and then back to the private sector, if corruption's become worse.
Well, let me cite, because we had a recent MAP meeting on reducing corruption by an international person by the name of Professor Robert Klitgard. He has a lecture in many communities, many countries, different societies, and the principles are the same. No? Alam na natin to, political will, transparency, accountability, rule of law, and justice system, no? And then the community and citizens' participation. Lima yan, no? Which I mentioned earlier. Now, use the same principles, no? Stick to them. Dealing with whether mayor, congressman, but of course there are different degrees, no? When it was in Congress during our time, meron kaming tinatawag na confessional. Sa office ni Deputy Speaker Boyet Gonzales, pila na yung mga congressman dyan. No? Okay, anong concern mo? I had my laptop, I knew exactly how many kilometers. Kung ba't ang laki-laki ng hinihingi mo, ikli-ikli ng river. Because I had all the data that I needed to be able to discuss intelligently. Nagugulat sila. No? How wide do you want? Ganito, may standard cost kami dyan. Okay, lalagay ko ganitong amount. Nothing more, nothing less. So, ganon. No? So, by the time we go to plenary, planchado na ako. No? O, wala na tayong diskusyon, ha? Pag may magtatanong pa sa inyo sa floor, asahan nyo, babawasan ko yung budget nyo. That was how bold I was. No?
Siguro if digitalization was already in place nung nandoon pa kayo, no, mas hindi sila makaka-emit.
Correct.
But the DICT was created just a few weeks after
I
you
was
let
using
go of
already my
your
laptop.
DPWH position.
Yes, that time I was already monitoring both the Primavera lang yan eh. It's a software that is used by contractors. You measure physical performance and financial performance. Dapat magsabayan, hindi naman nauuna yung bayad bago sa accomplishment. Kasi kung wala nun, nagbabayad ka, kalahati pa lang yung project, ano pang mangyayari doon? Hindi natatapusin yan.
So, sa tingin niyo ba ngayong may AI na tayo, generative AI, yan ba'y talaga makakapuksa
Of course.
doon sa corruption and yung pinupursige nating transparency?
Of course, you need to
Can
be able
happen.
to monitor government use of funds. That's one. What are the projects that are going to go to the various congressional districts? And it is incumbent upon the community to know exactly what projects are going to be funded in my district. Kami ba makikinabang ito o si mayor lang at saka si governor? O yung pamilya nila? O yung properties lang nilang madedevelop? If there's no transparency, kasunod dyan, no accountability. Nobody knows how it's going to be spent. No? And then, of course, to me, what's important is to get the youth, the Gen Z. I've been a very strong advocate of relating to the Gen Zs. No? Na we have to understand what drives them, get them involved in community and nation building by using government resources. Sila ay nakakaintindi ng AI, sila ay nakakaintindi ng digitalization. They should get involved. Let the older folks, kasi yung iba, tanggap nila, it's a way of life, defeatist attitude. Hindi pwede yun. Kawawa naman yung next generation.
And that next generation is looking for the most important thing, which is really trust. Trust in the public institutions. Kasi nga, kung weak ang public institution, public services tend to be weak. And in that equation, nawawala yung parang tiwala in doing your part as a responsible citizen. Maybe even paying your taxes. Maybe there's a pushback in the paying of taxes because nobody trusts the government.
That's what I'm afraid of. No? Pati kung youth is already a defeatist attitude. No? Way of life na yan. And then, walang mangyayari. Kawawa yung kinabukasan nila.
Are you getting any feedback from them that they might be entering that phase of a defeatist attitude because of the lack of trust?
That's why we keep advocating, relate with the youth. Even in the company where I stay, no, sinasabihan ko yung mga oldies namin, mga baby boomers, understand the Gen Z, Gen X, what drives them, relate to them. That's why we're going through intergenerational thought process, no, also. Wag yung one way, yung sasabihin nyo, nung panahon namin, ganito namin that will no longer work. Iwanan ka na niyan. If you're talking to a Gen Z, sabihin mo sa kanya, nung panahon namin, hindi ka pwedeng sumagot.
Ngayon, sinasagot-sagot ka na. Nung bumalik kayo sa pribadong sektor, what a role you've been in on 4 portfolios in 8 years, may water, may tollways, may power, napakarami, no? And an opportunity to work with the Gen Zs and maybe even intergenerational, may baby boomers. How have you then worked on that knowledge that you have in the public sector, and also the intergenerational
First of all,
challenge.
Cathy, my life has always been focused on public service. No? So, pagpasok ko wherever, no, I keep telling them, remember that you are in public service. Tubig, light rail, power generation, tollways, public service kayo. No, don't forget that. Reach out to the communities. Reach out to that student who wants to go home early on a Friday instead of getting stranded on the expressway. No? Consider them. No? Reach out to the communities and to the individuals that are relying on us. You are in public service operating under a private entity. So we should be better than what government can offer. No? Yun ang mindset ko in all of these companies that I joined.
Intergenerational, kahit yung mga baby boomers.
Interjays, understand what drives them. No? Intindihin nyo, importante ba sa kanila yung ganito, ganyan. No? To them, their work from home is now very important to them. Huwag mong bigyan ng work from home yan, maghahanap yan.
But we're also talking about baby boomers who've actually are now held to the same kind of standards that you've built, no? Coming from the public sector, you're asking them to be as transparent, as accountable, as you were when you were a public servant, as you now are in the private sector. So how are you dealing with that push and pull, perhaps,
The same.
now that you're in the private sector?
The same. Ang common trend niyan is public service. Do what is important, do what is best for your customers, no? And do it in an efficient way. No? Whether you're in public sector, private sector, it's the same story. Reach out to the communities, reach out to people. Love of God and country na yan, Cathy, at the end of the day. You end up that way.
But who takes the lead when one talks about governance? Is it private sector or the public sector?
It has to be both. Has to be both. If there's no giver, there's no taker. Sabi nga nila. Di ba?
So sa tingin nyo ngayon, sa pagkumpleto ng 8 taon na yon, and that I believe you are taking a bit of a break.
I hope so.
Okay, you hope so. So medyo meron pang karugtong. Doon sa 8 taon, what would your takeaways be then of having served both public and private?
Whether it is in the private sector or public or private, to me, my life has been public service. No? And you can do it.
Do you think it's more difficult leading with integrity in the public sector or the private sector, or
Both. Pareho lang.
kasing it's
Well,
challenging?
Yeah,
kumbaga,
only
no?
because there are rules in government. No? So, as I said earlier, good intentions might not be enough. No? Diba, nasira yung bumbilya, gusto mong palitan kagad, pakita mo muna sa COA na sira yan. Otherwise, sabi, hindi pa sira, nagpalit ka na. Ano? Ganon yung proseso. You just have to follow the process, but try to be as efficient as you can. Otherwise, that's why I keep saying, pagdating sa operations and maintenance, bato mo na sa private sector yan, because no amount of good intentions from an individual will address the difficulties of the red tape, processes in government, procurement, COA, ombudsman, dikit-dikit na yan.
Pero sa ngayon, kung titingnan natin ang mga surveys, and we don't even have to look at the surveys, many people think that there's a lot
Corruption's
more
there.
traffic
Yeah.
out there. Even as we've already created all the infrastructure projects that we
Yeah.
dreamed of having during your time, ngayon kasi most of them realized already, But there's still traffic.
Meron sinasabi kasi,
And in fact, sabi nga nila, mas
induced demand. You create more roads, you have
yun
more
nga,
cars.
yung parang you build and then they will come.
They come.
Do you
And that's
think
why, to
that we
us,
have
the
overbuilt?
Hindi naman. There's no such thing as overbuild. I'm saying national roads should give priority to public sector. I mean, to public transport sector. The kotse ka na, you can live anytime you want. Ang dami mo naman pwedeng daanan. Huwag ka na magpag-ititan dito. And that's why we're dedicating the bus lane. No? because the intention was really to give priority to public transport system. And I hope we will be able to finish many of the rail projects that are in the pipeline. Importante sa akin yung rail and mass transport.
Yeah, you're the master of rail projects, but then it is also a very challenging one when we talk about the right-of-way issues, ano, yung mga ganyan challenge. How do we convince the public that this is going to be good for them in the long run, despite the long-winded challenges?
Just pay the landowner the correct amount. Wag naman zonal value ibayad mo dyan. And that's why we had to change the rules of right-of-way. Pay them the correct value so that if ever they need to replace it, they can buy a replacement asset. No? So, kasi pag tinipid-tipid mo yan, hindi mo talaga makukuha. You end up going to court for arbitration and hahaba masyado. Keep in mind, public good. No? Bayaran mo na ng tama yung may-ari. Source of corruption lang yan. Hihingi ka ng malaki, tapos yung pala makikipag-side deal pa yung agent dyan. Hindi pa napunta ng tama.
What about bike lanes? Pag-isipan na ba natin yan? Because I would speak with bike advocates and they would say, dahil ang daming roads and bridges, hindi kami makapag-bike or yung aming desire to bike for health, nawawala.
Unfortunately, we cannot compare ourselves to European countries. Population-wise lang, ang liit na. No? If you bring in somebody from Denmark or bring them here to Asia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, where do these people come from? No? Hindi ganun karaming tao. No? So people mover, maluwag, bike lane, okay lang. No? The scale is quite different. Sheer population, no, changes the parameters. No.
Meron ka bang paboritong maybe city in the world na masasabi natin, pwede natin gayahin yan dito sa Maynila?
Well, again, Singapore, ang liit eh. No? But Singapore can be a model for cities like Iloilo, for Cebu, for maybe not even Metro Manila. Sabihin na natin, Pasig, or Baguio City. No? We're trying to help Baguio City. No? We're doing smart mobility transport project for Baguio City as MPTC. No? We're bringing in our partners from Singapore precisely. No? Alam nila yan, yung kung anong oras ang dating ng sasakyan mo, nandiyan dyan. Unfortunately, the whole of Baguio, what clogs the roadways? Taxi. Ang dami-daming taxi. More than half of the vehicles there are taxis na naghihintay ng pasahero. So, punong-puno yung kalye mo. No? So, fortunately for us, we have a very good mayor there in the person of Benji Magalong and very progressive. No? Na GIS na yung buong Baguio City. So, to his surprise, ilan lang yung may building permit.
So sa Metro Manila, wala ba kayong best example of a city na pwede natin gayahing overseas?
Unfortunately, we're looking at, of course, we've addressed Iloilo. We're very close to Mayor Treñas, and we're also doing the water system in Iloilo. You know? So LGU has to be open to. We're very happy with Pasig. You know? Very progressive mayor there. You know? Of course, Mayor Joy Belmonte is another example. You know? Mayor Abby Binay, unfortunately, their terms will end soon. So, ewan ko, sila naman papalit yan. You know, every time there's a new mayor, ibang priority project. So, nawawala yung continuity.
Nakita ko lang yung MWell wearable nyo at gusto ko lang tanungin kasi naalala ko yung sabi ni Shane, nandito lang siya sa programa. You're actually the top 2 healthiest.
Not anymore.
Exactly, not anymore. Top 10 siguro, but
well, still
what do you
3.
do to keep fit?
Well, I do regular aerobics, yoga, and stretching every morning. Walang paltos. Pagod, kulang sa tulog, kasama yan. I still play golf. I still can outdrive some of the younger guys. Nagagalit sa
Your staff, I hear.
And of course,
mo na sa kanilang
on the side,
pag-ehersisyo.
I do a lot of ballroom.
Oh, you do?
which
Okay.
is very enjoyable. And I do it sometimes with my wife, but my wife cannot take 2 hours straight.
Maybe she'd wanna do some dance sport with with your younger team.
Yeah, well, I also on the side try to teach. Mga apo ko, sabi ko, mga atinista kayo, hindi kayo marunong sumayaw. Sabi ko, I'll teach you basic, swing man lang, cha-cha man lang. Kasi pag nag-get together ko, tug. Kawawa naman kayo.
So mukhang meron na kayong side job after
I hope.
your retirement.
DI? As a DI.
As a DI.
I don't mind.
Dance instructor, okay.
I don't mind.
Well, it's been such a
Enjoy it.
pleasure speaking with you, Sec Babes. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
All the
much.
best on the next steps.
Yep,
Perhaps in the
thank
next
you,
program,
thank
you'll
you.
let us know where you're going.
Yep, appreciate
With
it.
your
Appreciate
mission.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, catch us again next Thursday at 9 p.m. Philippine Standard Time on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And if you haven't done so, like or follow my social media pages. I'm Cathy Yang, and this is Thought Leaders.